Okay, I think we can begin. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. My name is Kathleen, and I'm the membership coordinator at CGIC, and I'll be your host this afternoon for our National Continuing Professional Development webinar with Chafika Eddine. Before we get started, I'd just like to go over some brief housekeeping with you. All participants have been muted, so if you're not muted currently, please do so. Keep the background noise off of the presentation. Also, if you experience any bandwidth problems, you can turn off your video. You'll still be able to see the presentation and your stream will be better. Just letting you know that this session is being recorded today, so you will be on camera if you're visible in the picture. About CGIC, the Chartered Governance Institute of Canada was established in 1920. CGIC members include over 800 chartered secretaries, chartered governance professionals, accredited directors, professional administrators, and individuals who are interested in corporate governance located across Canada and in Bermuda. The Chartered Governance Institute is an international body with a network of 9 local institutes or divisions supporting over 29,000 members living and working in over 80 countries. Chartered secretaries and chartered governance professionals are the primary source of trusted advice to board of directors and leaders in the practice of good governance. CGIC is the only global qualifying organization in Canada that grants chartered status to professionals like you and is committed to empowering, strengthening, and advancing your status. CGI's designations are your passport to the and our international qualifying program will set you apart. For more information on the IQP and obtaining chartered status, please visit our website at cgicanada.ca. Some upcoming events. DEEP is designed for busy people who want to enhance their competencies and offers knowledge in the areas of governance, financial reporting and disclosure, strategy development, and risk management. Graduates of this 3-day program earn the accredited director designation. I encourage you to sign up today, so visit our website for more information. The next dates for the DEEP program are February 16th to 18th, and then more are following starting in April, so please check our website for more information. We have another CPD webinar coming on March 2nd at 1 p.m. with the guest speaker, Mate Drasic. So be sure to register for that one also. And finally, I would encourage you all to join our e-community and follow us on social media to discover insights, share knowledge, and network. Now I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Chafika Eddine. Chafika is a sustainability and governance advisor, a Doctor of Business Administration, student with a master's degree in community development, a Bachelor of Laws, and a project management professional certification. She has worked and lived in South, Central, North America, and Europe, and her experience includes 80 field trips to several countries, managing multi-site projects from pre-acquisition to closure, influencing and implementing strategies, standards, and policies for regulatory compliance and good governance with a focus on sustainability and best practices and risk mitigation. Chafika has extensive experience in the mining industry, and her past positions include Vice President Corporate Affairs and Sustainability and Director of Corporate Social Responsibility. She has board experience and is fluent in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Just before I hand this over and welcome Chafika, we have a poll that Chafika is interested in knowing. She would like to know where you are all signing in from. So if you all can quickly just tick off the box that best fits where you're located, that would be great. I'll keep it open just for about 30 seconds. It gives us an idea where you're all from today. Ten more seconds. Great, thank you very much. And there we go. Chafika, I'd like to pass it over to you now for a presentation.
Thank you, Kathleen. Let me just share my screen. Where is it? Here. And here, and share. There you go.
Okay, I'll stop sharing your poll.
And I want this, but Okay. So thank you for the introduction, Kathleen, and thank you everyone for taking the time to attend this session. My appreciation to the CGIC for the invitation. I'm very excited to be here to talk about something that I'm passionate about. So here's the outline of my talk. I'll probably be talking about 40 minutes. I will give you a little more context of my experience that resulted in this presentation. We'll tell you why I'm talking about this subject. We'll give you a very simple example of stakeholders mapping and feedback mechanism. We'll take 20 seconds to talk about the industrial evolution. We'll describe the problem this tool is trying to address. We'll also describe the general picture of mining and society, and we'll finally get into governance and feedback systems. We'll touch the COVID's effect in the future, and we'll end up with a few recommendations. There might be some typos. The design might be a little messy. You might hear my cat screaming at the background because otherwise we would be disputing territory in front of the camera. But I hope the content of this presentation will compensate it. So let's start. And before I begin, I want just to express gratitude and respect for the families and traditional lands of the lands where many of us are zooming from. And we come from a place of respect and gratitude to the traditional lands where we live, learn, and work. So my master's in community development explored the relationship between mining companies and communities. I addressed capacity building and systemic causes for sustainability failures. I am presently a consultant in the sustainability and governance areas, and I'm also studying towards a Doctor of Business Administration degree, where I am in the quest for a path to improve governance in the performance of the natural resource industry. I've been working with mining and local communities for over 15 years, including in Peru, Bolivia, and Canada, seeing positive and negative impacts that the extractive industry can bring with their presence. So whether you are for or against mining, I hope this presentation can be thought provocative. So I'm here to talk about my experience with feedback systems, also called grievance or community response mechanisms. So the mining and oil organizations started using the grievance or community response mechanism as a process to record and remediate complaints related mostly to the use of land and resettlement process. It's part of good governance recommended by the United Nations, IFC, and other international best practice. After they implemented the grievance mechanism, they realized the process could go further, and then they started using it as a feedback system to identify opportunities from the communities in their neighborhood. If you're familiar with the term ombudsperson, that's what the system is. The ombudsperson investigates complaints against business, public entities, or officials. So I'm going to be claiming that this is an underused tool with potential to give a voice to vulnerable communities, potential to reduce conflicts, identify opportunities, and manage risks in the extractive sector. I'd like to highlight that although my experience with feedback systems is related to mining only, I think this mechanism can be applied in different industries and situations. And before I start talking about good governance and the application of this magnificent tool in the industry, I would like to show you a very simple example that I came across when I was in India researching for my master's. And I was working with an organization called PRIA. They are connected to UNESCO, and they worked to empower excluded people through capacity building in order to increase community participation in governance. So during a visit to a community in Delhi, a group of girls shared their stories and showed how they learned to map the places where they felt most safe and unsafe. They also explained how mapping progressed from a simple exercise to getting authorities to take transformative measures. In this photo, the girls are showing the results of mapping their neighborhood. They placed happy faces on the map where they felt safe and sad faces where they felt unsafe, or neutral faces. The girls felt unsafe in space where boys were present. With this information in hand, the organization invited the children to be part of the conversation and explore why and what alternatives could be explored to transform this issue. The boys and girls discussed the issue and the options for creating a safer environment for the girls. Their thoughts were then shared with the authorities, who were able to take measures, some as simple as changing the location of girls' washrooms. This was a great example of empowerment by expanding the capacity of people to influence the problems that affect their communities. Also, an example of inclusion and participation with the contribution they were making to decision making. And basically what I'll show you is that feedback systems, the feedback occurs when the outputs are root back as inputs as it's in a looping. And the girls' example was a very simple example of mapping with impact, and when empowering inclusion and participation can result in transformation. Now, let's have a look at the big picture from the very beginning, how the world got here. So this is the evolution, in my point of view, since the Industrial Revolution. So the Industrial Revolution is somewhere in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and it happened because there was a need to address issues related to efficiency, quality, cost, and to remediate disagreements, the conflicts between employees and managers that were resulting in a decline in the productivity. So in the end, that situation provoked the need for a systematic approach. Since then, we had industries focusing on improving health and safety, environmental, social impact, and finally, a more integrative approach with environmental, social, and governance, attempting a holistic approach, including the economic aspects. So while we all want efficiency and greater profits, we also want to keep a decent quality of life, and hopefully even we'll be able to improve it and leave a better planet for the next generations. So let's go to the issue and the problem. And, natural resource sector usually have extractive developments in remote areas and will trigger social impact and elevate the risks of conflicts. In the case of mining, the origin of most social related conflicts can be linked to poor ESG performance. And statistics shows that these mining-related social conflicts are increasing and causing more social instability. And for that reason, it's becoming of greater importance to the business. So, and that's why I want to bring more awareness to this tool. The feedback systems are very simple database systems that can help reduce the risks of conflicts and it can fuel analytical tools. These mechanisms are easy to use, inexpensive, and can be effortlessly replicated. I feel there is need for more awareness of its simplicity and the advantage of its outputs, so that we can get more organizations making use of it. I've mentioned already that it's a recommendation from the United Nations and IFC as a guideline for corporate responsibility to show respect to human rights and business ethics. So it's the protect, respect, and remedy. The issue is that although some major companies are making the use of this community response mechanism a requirement in all their sites, there are still a considerable number of small and mid-sized organizations that don't use it or underuse it. So now let's talk a little bit about mining and society. Minerals and metals are the base material for the buildings where we find ourselves at work or home. They are the main ingredient in computers, smartphones, vehicles, and surprisingly, even the green technologies being implemented to improve sustainability in the world. I give you an example. Tesla recently affirmed that they will be producing 20 million vehicles by the year 2030. If they were to produce 20 million vehicles in 2020, they would have needed more than 30% of the total nickel produced worldwide in a year. Oh, this is the mining baby. And, you know, the first time I saw the mining baby, I was shocked. But this is the reality of how much minerals and metals an average American consumed during its lifetime. Mining can be the engine of an economy in many countries, and it's important for the industry to ensure that the positive benefits outweigh the negative effects. Mining can provide a great source of tax contribution, employment opportunities in areas where no other industries are present. It can also bring infrastructure, socio-economic development. However, some of the challenges faced by mining projects are connected to the question of mining being temporary. Some mines can have a useful life for more than 100 years, but technology has contributed to reducing the life of a mine to a shorter existence. The resources are not renewable, and mining is committed to a time-constrained business agenda. While mining search for new and more sustainable ways to keep extracting, setting timelines to decarbonize, we also need to rethink our lifestyles. So mine can be very complex with challenges related to distinct process stages, locations, metal prices being volatile, and many other elements affecting strategic plans and future assumptions. To make things a little more complicated, frequent mergers and acquisitions among mines in different jurisdictions are very common. And when that happened, the organizational culture is challenged. There are over 1,300 Canadian mining and exploration companies doing business in about 100 different countries. And 78% of these companies are small junior companies working on the initial phases of mining. To illustrate a little better the size aspect of different phases of mining, and those numbers placed here, except for the graph on the top right, the numbers below are just average numbers to give you an idea. A junior exploration company can have an average of 5 to 20 employees. If they obtain good results, they might grow to 40 to 80 employees plus field contractors, sometimes hundreds more. A mine will employ about a few hundred to a few thousand workers, but large organizations will hold several mines around the world and can employ hundreds of thousands, as shown in the top right graph. It's worth mentioning that during construction, a mining company with 50 employees may contract a dozen other organizations to build the mine and can easily end up with 12,000 contractors during a couple of years, building a mine that once it's ready to start operation may only need a workforce of 500, for example. The size of the company does not matter when it comes to the impact they might cause in society. History is filled with examples of small companies causing social instability, death during turmoil, and deposits that may be stalled for life. So the choice for the organization approach that they have is critical in the future that the organization and the communities may have. And we finally get to talk about governance and good governance. So governance is the process to make decisions and implement them. But good governance or responsible management is a desired condition. It's challenging to achieve with consistency. Responsible environmental and social management is a critical factor in achieving sustainability. It's about informed and organized participation within a fair framework. The aim is to provide accessible information in a clear and reasonable time. Doing the right thing and doing things well are premises to meet the needs of a society, as a way to protect and make the most of resources. Being inclusive allows the most vulnerable people to have a choice and ensures that they are offered opportunities to fully participate. And then accountability is a key condition for responsible management and can only exist if there is transparency and fairness. A participatory management approach needs a holistic and long-term vision, combining economical, social, and environmental needs. Good governance is important to make decisions more inclusive, transparent, share accountability with stakeholders, and ultimately to democratize awareness. Let's talk a little bit about the stakeholder engagement. To manage social instability risks, the natural resources companies, they must apply stakeholder engagement planning and feedback mechanism. Is a vital part of stakeholder engagement to achieve a peaceful future. Capacity enhancement, for instance, it's important for individuals and organizations to have or to develop capacity to complete a task with competence. Poor capacity often leads to conflict, and people need to be able to express their concerns and aspirations. Without these skills and support, they cannot have a meaningful control over their future. For example, the human capacity to propose, to request, to demand, to provide feedback, to implement, to plan, to participate, and to discuss. In order for these mechanisms to work, it's vital that people have the capacity to express their concerns and aspirations. In remote areas, for example, it's common to find out that communities often require more skills and support to participate. Identifying the concerns and aspirations of communities helps prioritize issues that are important. What we think it's important to stakeholders might differ from what they think it's important for them. The determining factors for a good and lasting relationship with the communities and also for effective relocation and resettlement process are not in the most expensive initiatives, but rather in the initiatives that make communities feel heard and thus included. Managing expectation is another important fact that can reduce conflicts. In exploration, for example, when a company is drilling to conduct studies, the communities may think that they are already extracting metals for sale. Workshops in communities to inform, educate, and raise awareness are extremely relevant, and the use of appropriate language and communication can make all the difference. When we have an inclusive environment, we build trust. And in order to accomplish sustainability in community development, it's necessary to take into account a vision formed by different eyes of children, eyes of men, women, and the elderly. The role of diversity in complex systems shouldn't be ignored. Chances of success improve when different voices are integrated. Science has shown that companies that are more inclusive and promote diversity perform better. They become more creative and more productive. And although it's clear that diversity and inclusion are vital for a healthy organization, mining sometimes fail in being more inclusive with its communities. And not only with the communities, mining companies have fewer women on their boards compared to other major industries. The world's top 500 mining companies have only 5% of women on their boards. And we finally get to talk about feedback. So when communities voice their complaints and concerns through a feedback systems, companies can review and resolve them accordingly. But most importantly, communities can feel that they matter. Mining companies are noticing the use of these systems can significantly improve their relationships with their communities. It helps them building trust and address concerns before they escalate. These systems can help to tackle the challenge of harmonizing cultural differences and understand the needs of diverse stakeholders. And in addition to being a source for opportunities, feedback processes are an invaluable tool for systems improvement, acting as a needs detector and showing tendencies and potential risks. Here are some examples of potential impacts that can be captured through a community response mechanism and then addressed. Demographic change, social nuisance, tensions between employees, or even sometimes the trucks are provoking too much dust in a community, safety and security, and it goes on and on. The feedback mechanism is basically the search for solutions that can satisfy the different parties, including, of course, companies and communities. This flow chart it shows the process from its beginning to the end, from the identification of a complaint. For example, in the case the company truck run over and kill an animal in the community. A mechanism is established with the formalization, notification, investigation, and resolution, and then the agreement for compensation, for instance, and ends with the communication report and monitoring to ensure the satisfaction was achieved. There are several sources for guidance for setting up these systems. And a very positive effect generated by the feedback mechanism is the improvement in the participation of the communities. For communities, the grievance system produces the perception that they will always be able to express their voice. These different graphs show the complaints capture per village or departments, areas of organization, etc. And here is a simple example of a complaints mechanism made in Excel. So some major companies, they have special softwares to make use of the system, but I would think that most companies just use the old good Excel. And this table, it's not very clear and it's in Spanish, but basically it's just to show you that it's just an ordinary table where you will record all the contact details of the person that's making the complaint. You can include documents and photographs, and then you follow up how long it's going to take for the results to take place. And this example, this is the Excel table. The next graphs will be the results of the use of this Excel table. It's going to reflect the complaints that happen during the construction of a mine, which is the highest challenge in mining, where many times the company generates a temporary migration of more than 10 times the amount of the population where they are operating. So here it is. One chart shows the identification of claims per type and the other per quantity in each community. If you look at the right graph, you notice that there are two instances or two communities where there are more complaints. And in this case, it's because the mining that was being built had two very close communities, and all the other communities were further away. And if you look at the left list, you're going to notice that in this case, payments were the key issue that was raised at this specific time. It's the one with the most number of complaints. And it was an interesting case. So first, I should mention that there will be like a lot of local providers during the construction of mine. And one very sensitive issue is when the organizations delay the payments to communities. It can generate a lot of conflicts. In this case, the company noticed that there were too many complaints, and then they realized that the communities, they didn't have enough training to be capable of filling up the forms accordingly. Also, they detected a need to improve their internal systems. And once they provided more training and changed their internal systems, the number of complaints for payments went to zero. So the mechanism not only provides the opportunity to solve problems in a systematic manner, but also transform the company-community relationship to include a more participatory role. These graphs would be examples when the main organization has many other companies outsourced working at the same time. So in the case of mine constructions, there are 10 times more people in the community. It's necessary to provide food and accommodation to all these people. You need to ensure impact is minimal, but at the same time, you need to ensure that the surrounding communities can take full advantage of these opportunities. There will be many new business for food, accommodation, vehicle, and heavy equipment rental that can be sourced by local communities. And it's important to remember that there's a limited duration for this opportunity. After construction, the mine will only need a few hundred people to handle the production. So through data collection, it's possible to identify the number of claims received from each different company and the type of complaint. For example, if company X received more complaints for health and safety, you can then go directly to company X to negotiate solutions. And I'll give you an example of the complexity and how the system can help. It's a case of a main organization that had a new company. They already had, like, let's say 10 companies providing services in their site. And then they had a new company coming in. And this new company was offering 3 meals a day to their workforce, while all the other companies were only offering 2 meals a day. Because the organization didn't have a feedback system implemented at the time, they were not able to identify the problem before it escalated. And they ended up with a strike. Once the strike takes place, it takes days for a solution to come between the parties. So they end up with a 5-day strike. All the work stopped. And they realized that if they had the system implemented, they could have avoided the strike. Feedback tracking can be connected to stakeholder mapping. So the first graph shows in red the number of solved cases, in yellow the cases that are still in progress, and in blue those that have permanent monitoring. Permanent monitoring is necessary to detect cases that include influential people, places, or sensitive problems. For instance, if the community complains about dusty provoked by the trucks that are coming in and out, and you solve the problem, you should keep the problem in permanent monitoring to make sure the problem doesn't come back. The graph on the right would be an example of stakeholder mapping. And then the organizations can ensure solutions are compatible with the risks. Let's say, for example, that during elections, there are issues that have priority in rapid solution. And for most advanced organizations, they could also connect the feedback systems to artificial intelligence. Here's some potential challenges and recommendations when implementing the system. So there might be lack of trust or misperception of partiality. And if you're starting the system, it's a very good idea to engage a third party in addition to the communities on the design and implementation. The system can be misused because people can end up ignoring other appropriate systems, such as human resource systems, whistleblowers. So it's important that an education take place for both the communities and the inside employees to understand the different systems and which system to use. And the other problem is that people might take it personally. It's not about a person, it's about the system. So it's very important to create a capacity on internal stakeholders on how to facilitate and the use of language and sensitivity. Here's an example of from the Teck sustainability report and how they separated the feedback from the grievance mechanism. And even if you're using the same systems, you can still separate. And grievance will depend on the company's decision on how to define the meaning of it. And mostly will be related to when the complaint deserves or merits compensation. And just some examples of actions derived from feedback systems. For example, if you're working in exploration and in communities where people are not very used to the mining phases, one of the examples here show a company that brought communities and schools to their site to see the work and to understand what kind of work they were performing. Also, we took communities to visit mines in operation to understand the difference between mining and exploration. And some communities asked for the signs to be also written in their local language. Workshops and meetings to address concerns and opportunities. While mining operations will have infrastructure, exploration sometimes work in the middle of nowhere with not even a place for where to hold the meetings, and they can be held just outside. And companies should take every opportunity to engage and to connect with the community, because at the end of the day, they are just another member of the community. They are just part of the community. And the potential impacts of a feedback systems, to identify and engage with stakeholders that can impact or be impacted by the business, give a voice to populations in vulnerable situations, capture multiple opinions, actions, reactions, and values, empower a bottom-up approach, search for systemic cause, and detect materiality and map key issues. Materiality is what is important for them. So sometimes just by finding out what is important for them, you can adjust your systems accordingly, your strategy plans accordingly, or even your sustainability report to address the subjects that are most important to them. So feedback system is part of the human rights, and it doesn't only address human rights such as working conditions and security, but address fundamental human needs, the need to participate, to understand or to be understood, and the need of identity. Applying best practices in feedback systems means that a system should be legitimate and engaging through collaboration, should be accessible. So mining companies might have local offices downtown, or if it's a smaller company, the communities would have to come to their site to make a complaint or express their feedback. The system should be predictable with reasonable expectations, so it's clear for both parties how long they think it's going to take to come up to a solution. Impartial and transparent. Looking forward and the effects of the pandemic, and one of the things that companies are figuring out when they have the feedback systems implemented is that especially when you work in remote areas where there's not much support from the government, communities will always count on the organization for help. So COVID was a big example of it. The communities came to the organizations to ask for help, whether it was just to understand what was going on or for support in dealing with it. So reflecting on potential next steps, it will be essential for organizations to ensure the safety of their own people so that production is not affected. And looking a little further down the line, organizations will need to update their risk management strategies and likely their management approach to decide on how they will deal with the challenge posed by this new world in the different geographies that they are acting. My main message is to adopt clear principles and guidelines, apply responsible governance, provide capacity, empower inclusion, and with all that we can affect change. And community participation is always a big part of my talk. I think it's very important to foment social transformation, support communities in becoming self-sustainable and owning their future, and to reduce conflicts. And my theory of change, when we talk about strategic planning to achieve sustainable development, this is what I mean. When you promote inclusiveness and diversity through assessing and improving and building capacity and facilitating multi-stakeholder and collective action, you end up reaching social transformation. And why we should do that? It's not only because it's the right thing to do, but if you fail to do that, it's going to result in a loss of revenue. In 2016, there were 400 serious conflicts between communities and resource developers in Latin America only. That meant at that time, over 20 billion installed projects around the world. The consumption of natural resources is a reality that will not disappear in the foreseeable future. And while we can't solve all the problems to optimize the industry impact, the feedback system is clearly a tool that generates positive impact. It's easy to use, useful, and inexpensive. And I believe it should be adopted by any organization that can cause an impact in communities. Thank you once again for your participation. I hope to leave you with some ideas for tools to improve your work and increase the impact it can generate. And I'm available to answer questions, discuss comments. And if we do not have enough time, please contact me by email or LinkedIn, and we can keep this conversation, or just send a message on the chat here, and I will get a copy of all the message. So make a comment, say hello, and I wish you all good health. And back to you, Kathleen.
Thank you very much, Chafika. That was very interesting and informative. Does anybody have any questions at all? If not, then we'll
Yes, this is Jason Purikel with ZillowWorks. I have a question.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yes, Chafika, first, thank you for your talk. Very interesting. I'm curious, ZillowWorks is a pre-revenue startup. We're developing a bioepoxy resin from industrial hemp. We hope to have first sales by the end of this year. And in sourcing our raw materials, which is the hemp seed oil, and working with farmers intentionally throughout Canada for this feedstock, we just shifted from an LLC to a social purpose corporation. How would you outline the steps as a very small bootstrapping startup company in terms of implementing these types of governance practices throughout our development in going from pre-revenue into commercialization?
Gee, what a difficult question. But first, if you're starting something or transforming, it's a great opportunity to get participation. I think that's the greatest thing. It's like if you involve your stakeholders in the design and the strategic plan, or to shape up what you want, you will end up with something that's not going to be meaningful to the organization, but it's going to be meaningful to all the stakeholders that are affected. So I think that would be the main thing, the main recommendation. It's engage and include that, and the diversification, stronger, more creative, more innovative, and more importantly, sustainable. And that's all you want.
I think we have a question from William Fung. Go ahead, William, unmute yourself. And
right. Good morning, Chafika. I have a somewhat simpler question, I hope. Maybe more simple than Jason's. So I read, I attend your seminar. So you mentioned about having a mechanism for feedback and to address these concerns. Obviously, there's going to be an umpire or ombudsman caught in between the two parties, right? The community and the corporation. There are countries around the world that has mining operations, and many of them are not as socially developed or maybe legally developed. And so on the one hand, you may have the government wanting to take this role in order to arbitrate, to take and then obviously there is the suspicion that they may side with the communities or try to control the corporation. On the other hand, maybe the corporation may set up a mechanism for arbitration, but then the community and the government doesn't trust. So how do you find that person that can mediate or arbitrate so that both the corporation as well as the country and the community can feel that they have been handled fairly?
Thank you, William. It's a great question. And, working in remote areas in the middle of nowhere with communities that had a low level of education, many times it takes educating them even to be able to have a conversation sometimes, even to be able to better express their needs and their wants. And I think it's like a kind of an organic evolution. The company will come to a community. Many communities, even with a very low level of education, they very organized, and it doesn't mean they don't have precious knowledgement. When I say low level of education, is more the traditional education that we talk about, school, but they have so much knowledge and so much to contribute to a relationship. And I think that's very important for the organizations to understand as well. Both parties have a lot of to contribute. It doesn't matter whether, the level of education that you have on the traditional way of thinking. It's more like a mediation of trying to establish a communication that both parties can understand and can communicate. And I think, to figure out who is going to be the person dealing with that, as most of the times, depending on the size of the company, they will already have a person who is used to facilitate and that will have skills to deal with a compassionate environment. And if not, it will eventually happen through different meetings where, you end up realizing that that person is, coming out as a good facilitator.
Thank you.
We have another question. Paul DeBall. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you very much. Hi, Chafika. Thanks very much for your great presentation. Just wanted to ask, one of the criticisms that mining companies have often faced in the past is that they go into a place and they do the mining and they exhaust a lot of the raw materials. And then when the revenue stream starts to dry up towards the end, if you like, of the mining cycle, there's always this criticism around the environmental damage that they leave and not, if you like, clearing up after them. How can we make mining companies more accountable to ensure that, that type of work, which isn't necessarily profitable to them, but they just make sure that they leave the environmental situation in as good a place as possible without actually just abrogating their responsibility and clearing off?
Thank you, Paul. This is a great question. And there's a difference, I think, between a company that's starting in a new mine, because the new mine, because of the new legislation, for instance, in most of the countries, before they start, they have to make sure they have enough money for the end, that they will the environmental, not only the environmental, but there's the social impact. They are expected to, whatever impact they cause. Let's say they are starting a new town because of the mine. They are expected to leave that town, even when there's no more mining, to be able to be sustainable through other work or sources of finance. But the problem is with the ones that are not starting a mine. So the expectation is different. In my opinion, the way that we can change that, and it's like more and more people are becoming investors, shareholders, right? It's like 30 years ago, only very rich people would be investing in the stock market. Nowadays, it's a different situation, more and more people are being able to invest in the stock market. So I think the big change will come when investors are responsible. Investors,
Right.
Companies that are sustainable. And when I talk about sustainability in mining or natural resources, the business is not sustainable because the resources are there's a name for that. What is sustainable? It's the way their activity takes place. So what is sustainable? It's being able to go and work in a place and left the place in a better situation comparing how they found the situation. Leaving a community in a better situation on how they found the community when they started. So this is how I think the easiest solution for now. I'm sure, you know, technology is changing, and we will find ways that you know, in the future will be so simple. It's like even decarbonization. We will find solutions that will easily transform. It's like, you know, finding the vegan meat, right? Finding hamburgers that taste the same, so that we don't have to rely on. So humans are very creative. We will find solutions, but how much time do we have before we cause more damage? So I think the easiest solution now is to ask shareholders and investors to be responsible and to think of the next generations. It's like, it doesn't matter if they're going to leave money for their grandkids. Doesn't matter the money if the planet is screwed up.
So it's sort of market pressures will provide that accountability, as it were, investor expectations.
Yeah, at least that's how I see. I think there's several different initiatives. I do believe the industry is putting a lot of effort in finding the environmental solutions to cause less negative impact and to optimize the positive impact. But I think, you know, looking at the larger perspective as a human being, I think it's putting pressure on shareholders and for investors to be more responsible when they are investing.
Thank you.
Chafika, we have a question from Lisa Hall, but it's to everyone, but I'll ask it to you as well. The accident related to Vale South Africa, a mining company. What would be the first steps in a disaster? Now, you might have to ask another question about that, but that was the comment in the comment box.
You know, I'm not sure I'm capable of responding this question. It's such a big question. And I just, you know, I could say something, but I just, I don't think I looked at this kind of a problem. You know, I don't think I researched or worked enough in this kind of a problem to come up with a brilliant short response. So I prefer not to say anything.
That's okay, she said. That's fine. Lisa, if you want to ask another questions, you can always contact Chafika directly, and maybe then she can clarify a little more. Does anybody else have any further questions this afternoon? Well, that was great. That was great feedback and comments from everybody too. Chafika, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for attending today. I look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day, and everybody stay safe.